It's a bit trash. No, I don't think I'm live yet.
I don't
Okay,
think you were live. I don't see anything.
now it
Also
says
not
I'm
popping up
live
on
on
your live.
YouTube. It's not showing the way that I'm used to it.
Yeah, I think I see something.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think we're live. Let me check if the start was
Yeah.
okay
And
because if I didn't share any. Can you go can you check the start, Aaron, of the stream to make sure that it
yeah, the start is 11 seconds ago.
Okay,
So
so it's okay.
it's fine.
Just making sure that everything.
Yeah, plus no one was watching, but also like there
Yeah,
were
but just
like
for
it
the
was.
if Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It works. Cool. All right. Welcome back, people. At the moment, Aaron's face is showing. I'm gonna fix that, not because I don't want to show his face, but it doesn't show the speaker. So you're getting now it's a gallery view, and Gabriel doesn't have his face shown, so I guess I'll just show our faces. Yeah, here we go. Death to the Christians. Bit of a provocative title, a big title, and a true title though, because we're going through a turbulent time in the history that we're reading in the story. We're reading Timothy 2, Peter 2, and Hebrews. I mean, it's part of Hebrews, right, Aaron?
No, all of
All
Hebrews.
of Hebrews. Okay, we read all of Hebrews. And at the moment, a lot of stuff is happening. A lot of the apostles are basically being persecuted, some executed. It's a turbulent time. Rome is going through a lot as well, and the Christians are getting a lot of the blame. And we're kind of seeing how some of the followers of Jesus are responding to this crisis, how they're dealing with it, how it affects their faith. And I guess what it immediately makes at least me reflect on is what do you do in a situation where your faith is being tested to such a large degree by the world, where it seems to be so incompatible with the world that you're unwanted and your beliefs are a detriment to the safety of your existence. So there's a lot there to discuss. The history of it is very, I don't know if exciting is the right word, but it's definitely very eventful. This story is
Thrilling.
It's thrilling. That's a good word. Thank you. I was discussing it with the author this weekend,
The author.
who I have private access to,
Nice.
and he was telling me, he says I can't read the Bible without feeling the thrill and all the excitement and the fear and yeah, that's it's quite something that the story is going through at the moment, and a lot of interesting passages to discuss. We were already discussing this a bit offline, what we can select for the Lectio Divina. But but yeah, I'll start us off there. Our beloved Michael, Archangel, Gabriel's
Yeah.
Archangel, right?
Archangel.
Archangel Michael is not here today, but he's here with us in spirit because he also made a commentary video on Timothy 2. I'll link that in the description. Michael, if you're listening to this, you're missed. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll try to, presence you a little bit, take you into account because we've spent some hours now doing this together. I'm gonna toss the baton to my brother Aaron, who always has something to add. So go right ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I had Spotify on in the background, so I was like really confused. Um, yeah, no, thanks. I think that's a good summary. I think the most notable deaths recorded was
It's like the Hunger
um,
Games. We're going through the
yeah,
biggest deaths right
exactly.
now.
It was James, the brother of John. So like one of the disciples of of Jesus, essentially. So that's pretty sad, and apparently that caused an uprising among many sort of Jewish people who were obviously very familiar with James and considered him a friend or family member. And then they arrested Peter, and then I think the other James, the brother of Jesus, was then stoned to death. So pretty rough. And all this meanwhile, you have to imagine Paul being imprisoned. So when he's sort of writing this, and he might be imprisoned again, we don't really know. We're also not 100% sure that he wrote this second letter to Timothy, though I actually think that the evidence is convincing. Even reading it, I'm like, yeah, this feels like Paul, which is not evidence. It's or it's not proof, let's say. But to me, that seems pretty clear. And I think it's just good to know that we have Nero, like the pretty awful Nero who is responding to this as well, right? So that means that at some point there's this uprising, Rome is on fire, and there's at least this sense, it's not entirely clear, history isn't clear on this, but that Nero blames the Christians for it, so he starts persecuting them, and then that's sort of you find it in First Clement, and then they talk about the fact that Peter has been persecuted, that Paul has been persecuted. So that's pretty sad. Like that's really the end of an era because we've been discussing Paul for
Yeah.
like months now. So we're going to talk about that and like how that feels. And he then writes this letter right before that to Timothy, and I actually think it's kind of touching that he sends like, please bring my winter coat and please arrive before winter, etc. Bring my stuff. And maybe all of that didn't take place anymore. Um, and then I think in this context, we can also imagine that people thought that Peter wrote this letter because he was also dealing with people who were persecuted, but it's very clear that this is probably a later letter. But nonetheless, you can narratively link it to what happened here in this time. And then finally, the letter to the Hebrews, which does probably date from this era. Um, by someone unknown, someone who we don't know. Could be Apollos. That's what's sort of suggested here, but we honestly have no clue. But nonetheless, he seems to be more directed towards this Jewish Christian audience, who seems to, it makes sense, right? Like that they're expecting the return of Jesus. Like he's going to come again. That's what we've been talking about for all these last few months.
Yeah.
And then you have Nero persecuting all the Christians. So
Yeah.
it's like, now is the time, Jesus. Like, you show up. Like, now is the apocalypse. It's happening, and he doesn't show up. So you can imagine why there are these letters thrown around. Like, okay, what is our faith and our religion about? So I think that that's just maybe one dimension that I wanted to add. That's the context behind the letters that we discussed. Um, I think I want to discuss something from Second Timothy, but I first want to ask, um, yeah, Lucas, what stood out to you from either the chapter
Yeah.
or from the books that we've read, maybe not going too much into detail, but more in the sense like, oh, this is something I want to discuss today with you, if that
Well,
makes
some of
sense.
what Michael discussed in his video essay, his commentary, when I read it before I even turned on the video, it spoke to me as well.
Yeah.
Some very powerful passages there about um,
Okay.
things
I'm taking
that
notes.
are very relevant, let's say, to our time of uh, individualization and well, being individualistic and being boastful and
Yeah.
kind of the antichrist incarnate in us, in people, in our society, in many ways. So that stood out to me.
Thank you. Um, GP, what is it that you would want to talk about today? What are
Well,
some points?
I don't really know. I don't have too much to say about these topics, but I just found them sort of interesting. So maybe if anyone else has things to contribute, but obviously the whole thing in Second Timothy around like who the opponents are, basically. We've got some names, and we've also
Yeah.
got we've got at least sort of a snippet of what some of them believed, who have swerved from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already happened, namely the general resurrection. So, whatever that meant exactly, that's interesting. Um, in 2 Peter, we have in chapter 3, verse 15 to 16, a very strong implication that the letters of Paul were considered as scripture whenever that was written. So that's interesting. Um, and then Hebrews was beautiful to read. So even though I'm not reading it in Greek, I really felt like what Bass said in the chapter, which is that the Greek is far more polished. for instance, than Paul's letters. So I felt that come through in the translation. Like it's really well composed, very beautiful book. But the highlight of that book seemed to me to be the notion of Jesus as high priest specifically. So I found that interesting. Again, don't know if I have too much to say about it, but I just thought I'd put a pin in that as something interesting that we could potentially discuss. And I haven't watched Michael's video yet, but I hope to. So, so if you talk about that, give me a little bit of context as to what he said.
Oh,
Yes, will do.
we
Thanks.
should watch Michael's video on air.
Yeah,
That'd be
I mean,
fun.
I would, but at the same time,
Yeah,
it
with
seems like
time.
we don't have a lot of time. you
Sure,
know?
maybe I'll add it as
So,
an addendum.
yeah,
If we stop, I'll just keep the stream going and I'll add it.
yeah, I think that
That
that's good
could be
actually.
pretty.
That like that
If we're
could be it.
finishing
Yeah,
on time, because I do have to leave the house at
yeah,
some point, but I think we could do that.
yeah. Sounds good. Okay, so I took note of all those topics. So I actually thought that the whole letter of of to the Hebrews was really fascinating too. So I would want to discuss something, but I don't precisely know what. I even think like, that first line of the letter to the Hebrews is worth thinking about, where it says, God used to speak to us through prophets, but now in these last days he spoke to us through his son, just to realize what that meant for people. But nonetheless, I think I want to do a part of Timothy for the close reading. So I don't know yet how this is gonna go, and maybe we'll do like a faster version of this than usual because Michael is not present either. Okay. Oh, I want to share my screen if that's possible. Okay. Let me try this again. Yes.
There we
Okay.
go.
There we are. So this is from Timothy 2, as you can probably tell. Let me get rid of this
Love this font though. It's great.
Plato font, right?
Play the font. You notice? Do you
Um,
notice, GP? This font?
I no, I couldn't just look at it and tell you what it is.
I love it. Plato not Plato uses it.
Plato used the
Plato
font.
used it.
The version of Plato I read uses it, and
Ah,
it just it's for me it's linked
well,
with that.
what is the name of the font? Is it called Play-Doh or is it called
No,
something
I
else?
have no idea. I've used a similar one in my thumbnails based on loving this font so much, which is called
Okay.
Marcellus. It's called Marcellus, but I'm not sure what this one's called. I digress. Let's go to this.
Yes.
Let's go to the
So
story.
just some context, like as I already mentioned, Paul's writing to Timothy, and I think he's really, I think it's really touching, honestly. Like it's this. He seems to really love him. So if we're going to go back to our discussion about Paul, whether or not he is continental, whether he is able to keep his sexual desire at bay. Like if he has any, it seems to be for young men, because honestly, like he loves these young people that he works with, but nonetheless, but it seems to be more this platonic relationship.
Celibate Socrates.
Yes, where he says, he says, "Oh, I'm yearning to see you. Like I think about your tears, and you are so pure, just like your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice in their faith." So I think also Bas suggested that you should think of reading this as it would be read to Timothy. So maybe Tychicus would be bringing this and reading this to Timothy, and what that would be like, to hear this, to then hear like all this encouragement that Paul's really trying to encourage Timothy. Um, and for instance, talking about that he should be a fellow sufferer of evil in chapter 2, verse 3. He should be like a good soldier, which is interesting, but he should also be like a good athlete, because you need to finish, the race first, which we'll get back to. You should be like a good farmer, and when you labor, you should be the first to partake of the fruits. You should remember that Jesus rose from the dead, which also seems to be relevant, being of the seed of David. Yeah, and that's I think where I want to take off. So, sorry, this is the right passage. Yeah, and then I think this seems to be worthwhile to focus on. So I'm going to read out the entire passage, and then I'll select one sentence for the ruminatio. Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead descended from David, this is my gospel, for which I am suffering, even to the point of being chained like a criminal. But God's word is not chained. Therefore I endure everything for the sake of the elect, that they too may obtain the salvation that is in Christ Jesus with eternal glory. Here is a trustworthy saying: if we died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we disown him, he will also disown us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself. And perhaps I want to focus on the very simple sentence that is right here. If we died with him, we will also live with him. Lucas, you can go next, and then GP.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
If we died with him, we will also live with him.
And for the next round, maybe use one sentence where you speak to what the text evokes in you. Also perhaps the broader context, but what kind of feelings are brought up in you, and if feeling is the right word even. Like, how are you attuned to what's being described here? Or perhaps what do you feel is provoked in you as you're reading this? And keeping in mind that we don't want to talk too much about our own opinions or about our own life story, but really focusing on centering, on invoking the spirit of Paul, who we think could be behind this letter. So for me, what is evoked is really a question and reflection on how I'm living myself.
What is evoked in me is a faith, an immensely powerful faith and trust.
What is evoked in me is a sense that this is the essence of Christianity. It's such a succinct way of stating the whole thing.
What is provoked in me is the fear of disowning him, either myself or other people I know, and then being disowned by him.
What is provoked in me is the necessity of the participation into both the dying and the living with him.
This is the provoked round, so let me think.
You don't have to. You can say something.
I guess it would be unfair not to. What's provoked in me is the question: what does that actually mean? What is this life that it refers to?
What is provoked in me is, what does this actually mean? What is this dying with him that is referred to?
What is provoked in me is, again, something that is provoked in me always with Paul, is where does his conviction come from, the depth of it?
What is evoked in me is the sense that this is nonetheless true. uh, in the sense that to the extent that we die to our selfish desires each day, we feel the rewards of that. We feel a deeper life.
I guess what also comes up is a question. What does it mean to reign with him?
What is provoked in me is similar to Aaron's. What does it mean to die? What does it truly mean to die with him?
What is provoked in me, a little beyond the very verse that we read, but if we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. That seems to be, those two seem to be in tension with each other. It seems like if we deny him, he'll deny us, but then he'll also remain faithful. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I had the same question. So for the next round, you can maybe spend a little bit more time. It doesn't have to be much longer, but maybe like a minute, maybe a minute or two even, um, where you can connect it to something of personal memory. So for me, I think it's related to the Lent disciplines that I'm going through right now. Um, Also because I need some encouragement to keep going, let's say. I it's kind of noticeable that I don't, on the one hand, I can tell the fruits of this voluntary sacrifice, as GP was also stating, to your selfish desires. And in that sense, this is a very fruitful time. And at the same time, I kind of feel like, yeah, but I've done this now for over a month. Seems long enough. I want to get back to my life. But as I'm stating that, I'm getting closer and closer to, to Easter. It's realizing, yeah, what this is actually all about. And then it becomes very touching again. And then I remember what it could mean to die with him. And I'm honestly really, really scared by what that could mean. So it seems true in the basic sense, but it seems true in the more fundamental sense too, which is honestly kind of terrifying as well. Like, this is genuine death in some sense, genuine death before that life starts. And at the same time, all the Christians I speak to seem to be so like, it's great, join us, So, anyways, yeah, that's it for me. Lucas,
Yeah, well, your thoughts stir up a lot of things, but I'll try to stick to what I was thinking of before, which is that
you're free to respond to whatever you want.
I'll just stick to what I did before. Maybe I'll form a response after. And I really hear it as a mantra, something that you should repeat, like we just did ourselves. From the first moment that I hear it, I was like, okay, this is something. When you're going through the hardest of times, when you are supposed to die with him, and you're going through that process of being persecuted or whatever it may be, this is the sentence that I would repeat to myself uh, in moments of doubt, and perhaps something that you should repeat to yourself in the coming 2 weeks as well. Yeah.
As I like that a lot, Lucas, the idea that it's a mantra. I think it'd be a very, very good mantra, an excellent mantra. And Aaron, I'm curious what you mean by genuine death, because when I first hear that, I think genuine death as in literal death, but I feel like maybe you mean it in a slightly different sense. But obviously, there's always the prospect of genuine death, although somewhat remote. I mean, literal death, somewhat remote in our times, but not impossible. Um, for me, gives me the sense that ultimately the good prevails. And so that's how I would put it, and that death does not negate that. Uh, so that's the way that I take it in like a very basic sense. Uh, And that resonates with my experience to the extent that I strive to be virtuous and somewhat succeed in being virtuous. That feels very true. Um, Self-sacrifice leads to a better life. And so, and also, it feels like when negative things get in your way, they don't overcome you completely. Uh, and so with that comes the sense that maybe death doesn't even overcome, if not you, then the goodness of being completely. And so that's how I take it. It's a very general sense, obviously. Um, it's not to say that I think that I'm um, going to live eternally or anything like that, but um, it does resonate with me.
Yeah, I think now is the free round, so that means that we get to respond to what we all said. I mean, I want I would like to know a little bit more about the last thing that GP said, for instance. There's no order anymore, so you're free to speak whenever. But yeah, what did you mean when you were speaking of, okay, in some sense it doesn't happen to you, or I didn't quite follow, but it sounded really fascinating. I just went a bit fast
Mm.
for me.
I said a few things, so I'm
Yeah,
not sure which was the
I have to listen back to it, I guess.
yeah. Did you sort of just struggle to get sort of what it means for me, or
Yeah. And that is specifically sort of nearing the end of that I was like, okay, I was following up until that point, but then after that it
when
got a
I
bit
think
different.
of when I think of my death, when I think of dying, um, and I think of it a lot. Like, I don't know if that's unusual. I think people generally tend not to think about death, but I find it to be very, very helpful to think about death every day.
Yeah.
Um, Not that I'm imagining specific ways of dying, but I'm just aware that my existence is finite and will end. But I feel in that the good is still victorious. I don't know how to describe it. I just feel like I will end. I'll cease to be. Um, but if I've lived a good life, that doesn't matter. Uh, and so the goodness of being continues. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's hard for me to put into words because it's just a feeling or a sense
Yeah.
rather than an articulated thought. But
Right.
that's what it brings to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like I think Lex Fridman always does his ChatGPT formulaic type questions to everyone that he talks to. So then he asks Jordan Peterson, "Do you think about your death?" And then Peter's like, "Every day," like in that very strong sense.
Yes.
And and then when he asked John Vervaeke's like, "Not so much anymore." I try to balance those two. I think sometimes that
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't want to have the seriousness of a Peterson who is like, I think about it all the time, etc. But yeah, no, I think that's good, and I think what I meant regarding genuine death, like obviously, well, not obviously actually, it might be genuine death, but that I'm struggling with this because one thing that I find most difficult in Paul, and you could even argue some of this is in Jesus when he speaks of being reborn, that there's this sense in which you reject the old self and you embrace the new self. Um, and I don't necessarily want to do that. Like I want to love the old self, and nonetheless, I acknowledge that there is a death of that old self, and that's I think where I'm struggling, and that death is in some sense genuine, and I think I feel it more this Lent now that I'm engaging so actively in some of these disciplines. Then I'm like, yeah, if I genuinely go on with this in some sense, then that naturally sort of leads to, that the previous I ceases to be.
Hmm.
And at the same
Hmm.
time, it's a more complete fulfillment of that previous I. And that's obviously, you know, we're going to talk about that probably with Matthew, but I think it was also in Mark that it's like, whoever denies himself for my sake, will regain life, but whoever clings on sort of to their
Hmm.
life, they will lose it. So in that sense, Could also think could also be this what do you call it? Pascal's wager type of thing. Like you're gonna lose your death, your life anyway. So
Yeah.
how do you want to lose it? I think that's sort of the
Hmm.
question. But it doesn't make it easier necessarily to lose, if that makes sense. Like the initial
Hmm.
thing is still terrifying, and um, yeah,
Yeah, it's hard not to also descend into the body upon happening. I think that's what I was thinking about when you were saying your story of, fellow Christians being like, it's great, it's good. And
yeah,
it is kind of great and good when you think about it. You're like, oh, I'm gonna be so perseverant and faithful when I get
yeah,
tortured and I'm to right death. But then there's just the physical reality of that, and you're just
yeah,
absolute turmoil is the same way Jesus was in the cross. I mean, it's
right,
it's things that you can sort of mentally prepare for, but you don't know what's gonna happen until you're there. And so I have no idea how strong my faith is because it has not been tested barely at all because I live in a country and blah blah blah. But that's why I find this text also so well. This whole thing that we're doing today, this chapter also so fascinating. It's like, what would you do in those situations? How strong would you still be? I, for similar reasons, like apocalypse movies for that to see what happens to humanity. I've always been fascinated by those to imagine what I would do in situations such as those. Um,
yeah. No, that's good. Am I still audible, by the way? I put my mic a bit further away.
you're
Okay,
audible.
okay, cool. Um, if you like, I think we can just sort of keep thinking about this because really, like as GP said, I think this is what it's about. It's like the
This is what it's
core
about.
message.
Yeah.
But I think we could also, given the time, I think we have about 25 minutes with GP left. So I think we could just transition into, well, a couple things. The points that we wanted to discuss. So, for instance, GP mentioned wanting to discuss Paul's opponents. Yeah, I think some of that was really fascinating. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on what you find interesting about it? And then after that, we'll go to the section that Michael left some commentary on.
I just found it interesting that we have names. So there are specific names, whether or not this letter is actually by Paul himself. At least in that general time,
Yeah,
there are specific leaders who had divergent views. And I found it also quite interesting that one of their views was described. Sounds like the idea is that and I think Bess made a reference to this in his chapter, right? The general resurrection has already happened.
mm,
Um, and so maybe it's a sort of spiritual resurrection or something like that. We won't be physically raised at the end of time, but we've been spiritually renewed or something like that. So in that sense, it sounds very much like a kind of liberal Christianity we might hear today. So it's interesting to have see that condemned very, very early on.
yeah, yeah. It also reminds even of, I think, all of the criticism that is aimed at people like Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
This is not just a psychological phenomenon.
Yes. Yeah.
Stop
Yeah. Yeah.
reducing it to, yeah. So I see what you mean. Um, yeah, no, I think like so their names are Hymenaeus and Philetus. I have the translation. By the way, that's one thing that I wanted to respond to that you mentioned. Um, that you notice it's different, the letter to the Hebrews, for instance. And one way in which I see that is that there are actually ends of sentences in the letters of the Hebrews, because David Ben-Dihar stays so close, to Paul's writing that he also doesn't finish Paul's
Mm,
sentences for him.
mhm.
So actually, you have this entire paragraph that you're continuing to read, and which I also kind of like. I mean, I kind of like it, like in Paul too. And I would say the letter at Second Timothy does have some stopping of sentences. So stylistically, it's a little bit different, but in terms of the content, it seemed to like it could very well be by Paul.
Could be at
Um,
the end of his life he finally mastered the art of finishing his sentences.
that would be great. Yeah, something like that. Like I could also imagine that it's someone like Tychicus, who wrote it down for him as he was sort of using dictation himself, who was, yeah, stating it out loud. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting too. That he has these opponents, and at the same time, I also thought that verse 25, chapter 2, was interesting. That nonetheless he says, correcting opponents leniently, that's something he advises, in case God might perhaps give them a turning of the heart toward a full knowledge of the truth, and they might recover their sobriety, slipping from the snare of the slanderer, having been caught by him to do his will. So pretty intense on the one hand. On the other hand, kind of beautiful that it has this sense of like, okay, it shouldn't be about debate me, bro, and I'm gonna, destroy you with facts and logic. It's kind of like, no, I want you to get to the truth yourself, which seems to be, by the way, I think a truism in therapy, that you want the patient also get to the truth themselves. So I thought that was kind of nice. And then we get to chapter 3, by the way. Unless maybe Lucas, you have something to say about this. But
I had something to say about what you said before. You know, the
Yeah.
Peterson psychological and physical and the versus
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
find interesting and I've pondered a lot because I agree that it cannot be just a psychological thing, but I also think people misunderstand what the physical is supposed to mean.
yeah,
And so we say, yeah, we're going to be physically raised, or Jesus was physically raised. It's not very much clarified in the Gospels what that means. It's very
Yeah.
much left as a mystery, and I think the church views it as such as well. And I think it's okay like that, and to leave it like that. To not have a high resolution image of what that's supposed to mean. I think that would kind of ruin it in many ways.
yeah.
But-
And I also think that what is specified is much more close to a spiritual resurrection. right?
Exactly.
So it's not
Spiritual
even clear
bodies.
that which is not the same as how we think of spiritual resurrection.
Yes.
Like
Right, I was just going to
yeah.
qualify that, Aaron,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Luke does say he ate fish, and like
Yeah.
Yeah.
so,
So
there's
exactly,
something
it
very bodily going on.
it could be touched, right? Like
What I-
his body could be touched. So and it could, yeah.
What I
So
really
all of that
like,
is-
I had a conversation with the author the other day about just miracles and such things in the Gospels, and he says, in his view, Jesus didn't do anything in the natural world that we are not able to do. So I was like, okay, what does that mean for the... There's a funny thing. Well, funny. There's a scene in The Passion where some guy loses his ear and Jesus puts his ear back on. And he's like, if Jesus did that, which is not in the Gospels, but if he did that, we should be able to do that as well. So the point is not a supernatural ability type of thing. That's not the point of Jesus, let's say. Which that's something that I just thought was interesting to ponder, because it also means that the Christian faith, in his view, which I do agree with, should not be based upon supernatural miracles. It's something whole else. It's the faith in the goodness of realities is much more impressive in many ways than that. Despite all the facts, the faith in the goodness of reality when you're being tortured is much more impressive. The faith that these early followers had, that were being persecuted, that were still loyal, etc. Peter's response of denying him is actually the most logical and expected response to all of this, I think.
Yeah.
I'm interested
Yeah.
in how I can transcend that. I don't know. I don't think I'm strong enough at this point.
It transcends the denial in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I would be able to. Like, I think about the stuff that I would do if my wife's life was on the line, or
Yeah.
yours, Aaron, or whatever. Like, I think I could do some terrible things. I think I would really be able to remove myself from God in many ways because of how.
But in a way, Lucas, it's good that you think that way, because you're halfway there, because you're not being like Peter was and saying, I will definitely endure.
That's correct.
Right. So
Yeah.
and then God's grace can come in if you're open and
I see what
allow
you
you to
mean.
do the thing yeah. Whereas Peter was like, it's up to me. Like,
I got this.
I know myself and I know that I won't betray him.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, we get to discuss this particular passage that you're alluding to, Lucas, in 2 weeks a lot. So I actually think that we should return to that and
Sure.
then, talk it over again, because I think that's actually very rich. I think Timothy 3, it discusses, Second Timothy 3, it discusses a little bit what Michael also focused on. So I'll just quickly read it. It's at the start of Timothy 3. Mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, godliness, but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. And there's more, but I think that's one way which is very relevant. And I think if I recall correctly, this is just sort of like Michael felt that this felt pertinent to this time,
Yeah.
which is scary because it says like, the last days, that's when there will be terrible times.
Yeah.
And you can, I guess, combine it to the sense of like how it's present in modern culture and media, even in ourselves. Like I think that was a strong point by Michael that he
Yeah.
mentioned. Like even in ourselves, we find we have these tendencies. So it has this diagnostic aspect, even though it was written 2,000 years ago.
Diagnostic.
Yeah,
I just heard that one for the first time.
it's a
Gnostic.
diagnosis.
Dia-
Oh, yeah,
diagnosis.
nice.
That's pretty
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. That's good.
Never
That's
heard
good.
that
I
before.
hadn't thought about that.
By the way, I
Um,
just had a comment on the YouTubes. I don't want to break you up, but I thought it might be interesting to do that quickly. Chad Matthew, Alvin asks, or he says, "I'd really love your understanding of spiritual." I'm not sure who that
Yeah.
was pointed at, but I think we just mentioned something like that. Maybe
Well,
it
yeah,
was you,
exactly.
Aaron, or GP.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, I think we could get into that, but it's like we only have 15 minutes left with GP.
Okay, have some patience for us, Chad Matthew, Alvin,
Yeah,
and
and we will get back to it. Like,
we'll
I
try
think
to
that's a
get back to
question
it.
for near the end.
Okay.
So I think, by the way, verse 9 in chapter 3 of Second Timothy is, but they will not get very far because, as in the case of those men, their folly will be clear to everyone, which is like also is this assurance, reassurance, like, eventually evil will expose itself. It's temporary always. So that's also maybe relates to what GP was saying earlier, that there's this maybe, I don't know, fundamental faith in the goodness of reality.
Mhm.
And then that was tied to what was said later on, I think in Second Timothy 4, and then I'll hand it over to you to hear what you have to say about all of it. Let me check.
Second.
2 Timothy 4, so it was near the end. So he was, first of all, at the end, Paul is like very sad. He said, "At my first offense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me." And then he says, "May it not be held against them." I thought that was kind of beautiful. But what I was alluding to was 4 verse 6. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. And it seems like it's a beautiful notion that this is the final letter by Paul and that he reflects on his life, like I have fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I have kept the faith, which also seems to tie into the earlier metaphor he used about you should be like an athlete, like, right? Like
Yeah.
you're gonna finish the race, like it's not yet done. And Paul kind of says like, yeah, I think this is the end of my life, essentially. So and I think that was sort of, it's this contrast to what was stated about the end times, and therefore to focus on this life as a sacrificial offering. So it's like a nice contrast to what was stated in Second Timothy 3. So basically, it's about perseverance in truth, even though there's corruption all around you, and also that grounded in a kind of faith, which is kind of like this loyalty, this confidence that eventually what the faithful sort of will be vindicated, like the goodness of reality will be vindicated. Any comments about this by GP maybe at the start, and then Lucas?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, chapter 3 is an interesting one. I think it's also important to emphasize that it's almost certainly written. So although we sort of might look at it now and say, "Oh, this is amazing. It refers to our times. How could he have known?" It was probably intended to refer to their times, right? Because
Of course.
they saw themselves as living in the last days. So So that's an interesting observation because it's sort of like we always think that sort of things are either the best or the worst right now, in our day, and that they have sort of degenerated or improved since previously. But maybe that everyone thinks the same thing about their own times. Um, I also think that I mean this seems to me, especially following on from the previous chapter, it might be directed against the opponents of Paul, or at least the opponents of the person who wrote this letter. Sort of to say that these people with a different doctrine or of a different kind of sect, I guess you could call it, they do all this kind of thing. Because, for instance, they do refer to among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women burdened with sins and led astray by various passions, always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth. That sounds like they maybe have a particular following among women or certain women, and that they're sort of like giving them these doctrines. Maybe they're sort of Gnostic
Hmm.
doctrines. Who knows? So that's interesting.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought so too. Yeah.
Janus, it's translated in my version as Janus and Jambres in verse 8.
Yeah.
So I popped back to I popped back to the books of Moses to say I was like, I don't remember seeing those names anywhere. Like where did they come in? But of course they're not. They're not in there. So this is a kind of extra biblical reference.
Uh,
Janus and Jambres were supposedly magicians of Pharaoh's magicians, basically, but they're never named in the Bible. They're
oh,
sort of named in an extra biblical tradition that
so
the
they're
writer's picking
Egyptian.
up. So that's cool. It's a bit like the Enoch references in
Yeah.
another book that we read.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry, those are just some sort of scattered thoughts there.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good.
What
Yeah,
do
and I
you
think
think?
I think in general, like that is interesting, by the way, that Paul has this sense of like, they have a wrong sense of the truth. These men, like who talk about the resurrection already have happened, and you can also tell because they're sexually immoral. It's kind of like this double
I,
fault
I,
that
I
that
feel,
has there.
sorry, just to interject one more time, I
Yeah.
feel like this could be a kind of, I don't want to call it Gnostic because I don't like to use that word as a term of abuse, but like it could be the sect that has a far more sexually liberal
Yeah.
kind of persuasion. And somewhere, is it in this letter or is it in Peter, Second Peter? But somewhere they refer to like misusing the letters of Paul. And you could
Yeah,
see
that's
how
Peter. Yeah.
certain aspects of the letters of Paul could be used in that way to say, and actually are used in that way, I guess, by more sexually liberal Christians to sort of say that it doesn't really matter what kind of
Yeah.
sexual relationship you're in. And so yeah, it's interesting that that might have been going on from the start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'll read out some like so a few more things about that. In chapter 3, verse 16, it says every scripture is divinely inspired, which is interesting. Um, literally means God breathed, which is interesting.
Nice.
Like it's not the same as
That's
saying
dope.
that it's like,
God's word.
divinely dictated, but it
Yeah.
is God breathed. It's inspired. Um, then yeah, I think we have discussed most of the things. I think there are just some small notes like what I said about, that he says like bring my big cloak, bring the books, the parchments especially. He says like Luke is with me, which is cool because we're going to be reading Luke not next time, but the time afterwards. Take Mark along, who we have already read, obviously, and bring him with you, for he is useful to me in ministering. And this also seems to support the sense that maybe Luke was, already in touch with Mark and read parts of Mark that he then used for his own gospel. I also like that when he said that no one supported him, that nonetheless he feels confident, like may it not be hold against them, because the Lord was also with me. And he has that beautiful reference to being rescued out of the lion's mouth. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Um,
It was cool.
I think so. In the interest of time, I would say we skip Second Peter. I want to get back to
Poor
that, but I think
Peter,
after
man.
GP leaves. Well, poor Peter, but he didn't write it, you know.
Whoops.
But we'll get back to
Lucas, did
that.
you have anything to add? I feel like you're gonna say something
Oh,
about
sorry,
Paul.
Lucas.
No.
Oh,
I did. Just forgot it. I forgot. It's okay.
oh,
Let's
sorry,
just
but
move
that's
on.
still my bad.
No, it's all
Sorry.
good. You're good.
Um, yeah, so then I think the one thing that you did want to talk about with regard to Second Peter GP was the fact that letters of Paul are regarded as scripture, which was is definitely interesting that you can kind of see the tension. But I feel like we kind of discussed it, but maybe you want to say something more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's too much to say, really. It's obviously quite early that that
Yeah.
conception arises. Although, I mean, to me, it doesn't look like Second Peter was written by Peter in any sense, but that's just me.
No.
But still, it can't have been too much after. So it still suggests that quite early in the church, these letters
Yeah.
were considered scripture, which is really interesting.
Yeah, so exactly. So I think if Origin said like if even Origin already said like, yeah, this is not written by the original Peter. I think it was living in 200, Origin. So that means that they did predate Origin, but nonetheless,
Cool
even
name.
Origin himself was already like skeptical, like probably not written by Peter.
Yeah.
Um, so then let me just go to the chapter and see if there's anything that is relevant here. I mean, like there are some defenses by Boss, like why it has been written by Paul, or why that can be perfectly understood very well, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Second Peter, yeah. So we can also discuss it at the end, I think, because it is written last.
Yeah.
What is interesting also, like that it has this memory of like, oh, remember when we were on the mountain with him, etc. So it's like the one letter which mentions like this first sort of eyewitness account, but obviously it's a bit too on the nose, because it's like, yeah, I'm not sure if that's the real Peter writing this.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like it speaks to, the gospel already being shared very widely, and that being like this story that everyone knows probably. Okay, and then I think it will be interesting to talk about the death to the Christians part as a transition to the letter to the Hebrews, um, which again could be written by Apollos, could be written by Barnabas. Some people even think it was written by like, for instance, Phoebe, who was mentioned, like so one of the female followers, but we have no way of knowing. Um, and there are some themes which are very Pauline in it, like being placed above the angels, and that therefore the old law no longer works. I also heard that, unfortunately, because this was written to Jewish Christians, this was then later used in anti-Semitic context, where it was like much later, I mean, where it was like, yeah, this letter proves that, Christianity is better than Judaism, like a kind of in this sense, because that's what the whole letter is about, starting to prove like this is the fulfillment of it, like everything else before that,
Uh,
which does nonetheless seem to be a bit rough to argue, I'd say, because like he is using all those references because he holds them in such high regard.
yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, I thought the first sentence already was fascinating, where he says, "In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, and through whom He also made the universe." Which is just quite the statement to start off with.
Yeah.
Just say like, through Him He made the universe, but He also spoke through Him. And I think that summarizes the entire letter already, because it's like, if He spoke to us through His Son, you ought to take that far more seriously than having spoken to us through his prophets. But those are some initial thoughts. Maybe GP, you want to start off with your thoughts about the letter to the Hebrews, and then we'll respond because maybe you'll need to go soon. So, and then Lucas can also
I
respond.
was also very struck by the high Christology of the opening of Hebrews, the sense that Jesus is very, very high indeed, um, divine in some sense. Exactly what that sense is harder to tell. I don't. It doesn't appear to me to be straightforward Trinitarianism. It doesn't appear to me to seem that he's identical with God. Um, but maybe it seems like maybe it's more of like an Aryan thing where he's the first, the first creation, and in that sense, and it also says he's the image of God, um, which is quite striking. Um, it also says in later verse, where is this? Did I note it down? let's see. Yeah, so in chapter 5 is one example, verses 8 to 9. It says that he learned obedience and became
Yeah.
perfect,
Yeah.
which to me might suggest that, again, it's not a simple case of Jesus as God, but because otherwise it seems odd to sort of say that he learned obedience and became perfect, but maybe is, again, like some uh, first creation of God or something like that. But anyway, all of this is very, very interesting that
Yeah.
it's here. It's maybe it's between the sort of very early Christian views of maybe Jesus' immediate followers and something like you see in John, which I would say is an even higher Christology, where it seems at least that Jesus is identified with God, and this might be an in between position. And then obviously the other thing to say about Hebrews would be the role that Jesus plays as a high priest, a kind of cosmic high priest. So he's very much a mediator,
Yeah.
which again justifies this kind of high-ish Christology where he is very close to God, but not maybe simply identical with God, but also very human. And it actually emphasizes his humanity, that he knew our weaknesses like firsthand. So that's those were very, very beautiful passages where it's talking about how he knows our weaknesses and intercedes for us, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't know. I liked this one a lot. Well, I guess what jarred on me, and what jars on me throughout the New Testament, is just the quotations of Old Testament scripture and the interpretations of those. And I know that that's not unique to sort of Christian writers, because you see the same kind of thing with Jewish rabbis at the time. Like they're very creative interpretations. Let's just put it that way. And so, for
Hmm.
instance, in Hebrews, in the first chapter of Hebrews, you have these quotations where, in the original context, it's talking about something different, like it's talking about the king or something, right? But then this is attributing it to talking about Christ. And in some cases, it seems like it's even talking about God just directly in the original um, in the Old Testament text. It's talking about God, and then sort of the writer of Hebrews is pulling it and saying this is talking about Jesus. Uh, so so from my sort of modern perspective, those always jar on me because I'm like, that's really that's really a bit of a stretch. But anyway,
Yeah, I kind of heard that this was kind of less incidental than people wanted to think, that there's like far more but also that it's less creative than people want to think, that it's actually like, yeah, but if you read it closely, there is actually some good reasons why he concludes matters in this way. But like some of them clearly are pulled differently, and some of them are to form an argument, I'd say, to be like exactly like he's talking to God about it. And I also thought that like that his reference to indeed Jesus learning obedience, I was like, I thought that was like really touching, because I really felt that this got closest to how I believe sort of, you know, our dad has been talking to us forever in yeah, really reminding us that Jesus was fully human, etc. And I thought that was like really clarified here. It was like, yeah, he was fully human, but at the same time, he was also fully divine. Like, I think this is the first letter that fully keeps that balance
Yeah.
completely, where
Well,
it's
it's
like, yeah, like you need to
tension.
learn. Yeah, exactly,
It's a
exactly. Like,
tension and a paradox, just as
yeah,
reality is paradoxical. So it was Jesus. I think that
yeah,
that only makes sense and
yeah.
nonsense.
But
so
but
Aaron, just to
yeah,
clarify, you would say that for you, Hebrews does depict Jesus as fully divine as well
yeah,
as fully.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
So that sense of becoming perfect, that's not an
no,
issue.
no,
No.
no, no. So I kind of really think of it in that similar way of like Philippians, where it's like, he willfully sort of became a slave, etc., which sort of means that um, that God in human form, he has to sort of relearn everything, and that's sort of the point. That's really like, yeah, like this is sort of the offering that I'm giving, because that's the argument of the letter, right? Like that he became the final sacrifice. But I would say that he was fully divine. Like I'm not sure like he's completely equating them, where he's saying like, oh yeah, you have God, but then that's divided into three parts, which are all equal to, like, he's not having that Trinitarian view necessarily, but I think it's very clear that Christ, like the highest, most important thing, and that nonetheless he had to learn obedience on earth.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think it's also going back to the paradox thing. I think people struggle with the Trinity because they cannot see how things can be the same but different at the same time. That's
Hmm.
what James Filler really helped me with, a theologian who wrote a whole
Hmm.
book about this idea of relationality, that over a substance ontology, he advertises a relational ontology, because we are brought up in a substance ontology that takes the highest form of reality to be a
A thing.
oneness,
Yeah.
a thing, and therefore a oneness. And I guess what the Christian faith tries to express is that the highest form of reality isn't exactly oneness, it's also not exactly plurality, but it's a tension between the two. And so nothing exists on its own completely. And so God is one, but God is many. I think that that's a tension to hold. It's not a decision to make.
Yeah.
And I think the figure of Christ embodies that. It's not an either or. That's the way I understand it, at least at the moment.
Yeah. And I also like, so that was, I think that's really good. And I think that tension, it seems like the author of this uh, sermon, essentially, like it seems to be more like a sermon than like a letter. Um, he is aware of that paradox constantly. Like, so even this is a different topic, but the fact that he shows this paradoxical is like the very famous first verse of Hebrews 11, so near the end, where at least in the NIV it says, faith is being sure of what we hope and certain of
Yeah,
what we do not see. You know, like, so it's like you have this tension again where it's all about yeah, that's what faith is all
it's
about.
funny. It's certainty and
Uh,
the hope.
yeah, yeah,
It's very
exactly.
different.
So I think that's, and then he obviously lists all the ancients that were commended for it. Um, and by the way, it's also fascinating that he says, like, he is a high priest in the order of Melchizedek,
Mm.
because, like, who's Melchizedek? Like, no one's heard of Melchizedek. Like, he shows up once, like in the story of Abraham, and then he's referred to once, I think, in the Psalms, that David also was in the order
I
of
think we're
Melchizedek.
also just dealing with technology, that the scriptures being the technology that made a lot of sense at the time, and we got to take a lot of steps to kind of
No,
get it to ring true to us, or
no,
to connect to our times. Like, I think most of us are just way too baffled by some of the things that are being said relating to miracles, for example, that
yeah,
we don't really understand the function that it served at the time. At the time, people didn't struggle with the miracle aspect so much. I mean, there were magicians all over Egypt. Many ways that wasn't the point. Um, the the aspects and the value, I think, that we're seeing now through doing these sessions, I think is what is more intended for it at the time. Um,
The Melchizedek part actually was the part where I was a bit more impressed by the citations from the Old Testament. There was certainly the interpretations were certainly creative, but I think that that is a genuinely mysterious episode, let's say, in the
uh-huh.
Torah where Melchizedek appears. It's like, what is this? So I thought that, yeah, I think it was quite impressive how he built an argument around that. To sort of say there's this other priesthood and it's an eternal priesthood, and so yeah, I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, and also like that he specified, like, yeah, when we read about him, we don't hear anything about him having a father or a mother. So he's without genealogy, he's without beginning or like of days or end of life. So he's resembling the Son of God. He's forever. Like he's kind of like almost this divine figure, which is, and then he says like, this is obviously the argumentative point to all these. You can imagine like this was, I think, a group of Jewish Christians who were now considering, okay, Jesus is not coming back, so let's go back to Judaism. We have more respected rights as a Jew than as a Christian, etc. And also, maybe it's just not true, Christianity. And that he then says that their, great forefather Abraham is like, yeah, Abraham, he paid tribute to Melchizedek. And Melchizedek, like that's essentially even an image of Jesus. So it's like, so he's building up the hierarchy where he's saying like Jesus is so much more fundamental than than what you are otherwise going back to. And by the
Mhm.
way, this I thought find this a little bit confronting. That I think he says somewhere in this letter as well. That is like, if you go back after learning about this truth, that is far worse than being naive about it, you know?
Hmm.
It's kind of, and I thought that was like, and I also understand it in some
Yeah.
ways, but at the same time, it feels very tricky, right? Like these people who voluntarily go back. So, yeah. What do you think about some of that?
I'll let GP talk because I know you're kind of short on time.
I mean, yeah, and I guess I'll turn this into my concluding thoughts as well.
Also about
Um,
Second Peter or whatever, or about the chapter, whatever you want to share, and we'll respond to it after you
yeah.
leave.
I mean, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this in response to your last question. What do I think about that idea that if you go back, you're even worse? I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense within the frame of reference that they're operating. It makes sense if you truly deeply believe this thing that you believe is salvation itself. So internally, it's consistent and it's logical. So I get it. But you also see it in every other cult and every other sect and every other religion. And so and then maybe that's what you're picking up in terms of the confrontingness, right? It's like once you swerve from the truth, then you're even worse than someone who's never come here because you're a traitor to our group, basically, a traitor to the truth.
But do you think it's
Um,
reducible to that, to like a social, psychological part, or do you think there's something about,
I think
grasping the truth of reality?
Yes and no. Like I think that to the extent that any religious group has somewhat of a grasp on the truth, then what you say is correct, right? Like you really are swerving away from it. Um, but then the whole question is, how much of a grasp does that religious group have on the truth? And I think that the motivations for people leaving are complex and sometimes. Sometimes genuine and sometimes more based on like desires and stuff. Just like I think that the ideas, the reasons for joining a religion are often based on, let's say, desires rather than intellectual conviction. So when I was looking at the philosopher Shaler and his turn away from Christianity at the end of his life, these are the very things that I was thinking through. Because some say, oh, he just left Christianity because he divorced his second wife because his Catholic wife, so he couldn't remarry, um, and fell in love with someone else, and so it's like reducing it to desire. But then he had good intellectual reasons for doing it as well, and so this is the puzzle.
Well, I mean,
But
there were bad intellectual reasons, but they were intellectual reasons, yes. Just kidding.
yeah, you want to add that? I would say that they were
I'm
relatively
just kidding.
good
I'm just
intellectual
kidding.
reasons, but yeah,
Just
sure,
kidding.
sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I would come down on the side of it being more an annoying's too light a term, but I would be against that kind of thinking, just because that's how I live my life and how I think. Like I don't like to get locked into sort of groups, and I don't like to get locked into sort of ideologies, and that's how I would put this kind of thinking. And so, all the stuff in the New Testament, and especially in Peter and Timothy, in the books we've just been reading, that are sort of against heresy, against deviations. I've got the truth, you don't. These people have swerved from the truth. These people are only believing this because of their physical desires and Satan whispering to them. All of this definitely grates on me. Like I don't have much time for it. But I also know that it's a natural part of religious phenomena. Like it's not something that I think we can excise from society. I just think that those who rise above it should rise above it. Like those who can think beyond it should think beyond it. So yeah, I mean those would be my thoughts. Uh, it's one of the things that annoys me most about Christianity, I think, is the degree to which it's enwrapped with a sense of apostasy and heresy. Like, like the glee which some new Christians will take in calling other people, even if they've just converted, right? Calling other people apostates or heretics is just one of the more annoying things I see online. But anyway, I'll
Yeah,
leave that
online,
there.
because I've never met a Christian like that, but
Okay,
online, yeah,
okay,
sure.
yeah,
I
yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Um, um, but understandable too, right? Because they've found this truth and they've been swept away by it, and so on and so forth. Um, Concluding thoughts on the books. Um, I don't know if there's anything that we haven't mentioned already. I think I think it's interesting. I mean, two Peter to me seems almost certainly to be what's the term, pseudo-epigraphical? Is that the correct
Yeah,
term?
pseudepigraphical.
Pseudepigraphical. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, I Second Timothy might. I can't think I had a glance at Wikipedia, and I think that it was a clear majority of scholars think that it is. So that's interesting. So in this case, we're dealing, and then of course, Hebrews is because it's attributed to Paul by tradition, but it almost certainly isn't by Paul. So all these books, in a way, could be pseudepigraphical. So I think that's interesting too, like what's going on there. And I don't know enough about that to really understand it. Uh, because I know people say it was a literary genre, so it's like the original writers and readers wouldn't have seen it as a forgery. But then it's interesting that it becomes so quickly absorbed in the tradition as the books of these literal people. It's also interesting how they kind of pretend to be those people. Like they have maybe personal instructions and greetings in the text. They refer to things that we saw on the mountain that actually they didn't see because they're not Peter or they're not the historical apostles. So I don't know how all that works together. I think Bass makes a passing reference in the chapter um, to that being a genre and being expected, but I've never been able to put it together how it was an understood genre and was accepted and then became absorbed in the canon very quickly as the actual letters of these people. Uh, so anyway, that's just an open question. I'm not saying that that's a criticism because I think I'm just lacking in some knowledge there. Um, but I want to end on, as always, something positive rather than something negative. I thought when I was reading Hebrews, I really thought it was an extremely beautiful book, and it helped me to understand how Christians see Christ, and even to extent how I see Christ, right, as a mediator between God and man, as someone bridging that gap, as someone and sort of how it takes the Jewish faith and kind of does something interesting and new with it, uh, and sort of uses the symbols from it, uses the scriptures from it, and and in its view transcends it and sort of eternalizes it. So I found that very, very interesting and very cool. Uh, and yeah, I thought it was some very, very interesting works that we read, and I'm looking forward to delving into the Gospels again, delving into Matthew next time.
Thank you for participating once again, GP, and I'm sure we'll take off responding to what you just said. But we're grateful as always for having you participate.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah. Sorry, I feel often that I'm being too critical, but
Not at all.
hopefully,
We
No,
need more of
no.
that, man. And
Yeah,
you're critical in the best possible way.
beneficial adversary, right?
You're always beneficial. It's
Oh,
great, really.
well, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. We'll see
All
each
right.
other in
See you
2
guys.
weeks.
see you,
Will do.
GP.
Thank you,
Lucas
GP.
will
Bye.
stay, right?
Yeah, I'm staying.
Okay, cool, great.
Got like half an hour.
Okay, cool. That was good. Is there anything that he said that you wanted to respond to?
Why don't you lead off?
So, like a couple things, like I mean, pseudepigraphy I find difficult, also. So I don't want to talk about that for too long. I don't exactly know how it works. I think there's something to be said that the people who wrote it kind of really felt they were writing in the spirit of, and therefore that you could take this license of saying you were the author, because I think, like we're also you have to remember that we're very atomistic, right? Like we really think like, okay, you're you
Yeah.
and I am me, etc. Having said that, obviously, like Paul, nonetheless, like he sometimes says at the end of his letters, like, I write this with my own hand. Look at my handwriting. So it's not like Paul was totally cool with just being,
Yeah, different type of text as well, I
forged. Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
exactly.
I agree
So
with that.
all of that is relevant. Then I kind of, I'm not sure if I fully agreed with, let's say, this Christian sense, like that there's this Christian smugness, but maybe that's just because
I
I
mean,
know different
new
Christians.
converts.
Yeah,
That's a real thing, and
that's true. That's
we're
true,
also
actually. You're right.
like
Yeah,
there's places. I mean, we're in the Netherlands, man. Like we get a different type of Christian here than some other places. It's a
yeah,
different culture, but definitely there's a reality to what GP saying, and
Yeah.
And I disagree with that as well, and I think it's probably one of the worst things to do. I mean, I understand the worst sins to be in God's name, and so
Yeah.
to behave basically anti-Christian in the Christian name, I think that's despicable, and
Yeah.
I think that should be condemned, which he rightfully does. So
No, so I totally agree with you, but I guess I don't see it necessarily rooted in this time already, because I think that was the point that he was making.
ah
This time they were saying like, yeah, I read this all over the New Testament, and then I'm like, well, actually, to me, it makes good sense that, you know, we think of being this protected individual in a state where we have rights,
yeah,
etc., like all of that, and for them it was really like, no, we're kind of illegal, like what we're doing.
yeah,
It's not encouraged. Like you're supposed to really pay tribute to the emperor as if he is God, you know. Um, so that means that the community you have and the close knitness of it is really all you have going for you, let's say. Like that's really the point that should be so central. So I can totally imagine why they would be very careful. And by the way, you could argue that that's exactly what um, survived evolutionarily, if we're talking about, let's say, group evolution. And it's like, yeah, to really care about sexual morality, for instance, inside your group, to really be careful. And by the way, I also felt that it wasn't necessarily, oh, it's them with their sexual immorality. It felt it was more like it's them with their different opinions or different ideas of what reality is like.
yeah.
And by the way, you see that reflected too in their sexual immorality, but it doesn't start off with condemning the sexual
No,
immorality in and of itself. It only does that, for instance, when, like what Paul does in the Corinthians letter, um, when he's then talking about the guy who slept with his father's mother, you know,
yeah,
like, and then it's like, okay, yeah, that's only about sexual immorality, but usually it's really more focused on, I think, the perspectives I felt. But nonetheless, like there was obviously a lot in there that was true. But those are some things. Like, what do you think about that?
no, I agree with that. I don't have much to add to that.
Okay,
Um, I I do have a really cool passage.
where?
It's it's Hebrews 10.
Cool,
This is like pure Girardianism, and Job entered the chat, by the way. I invited him in.
nice.
I don't have a lot of time though, so we'll see if his face pops up. All right, listen to this. The law is only a shadow of the good.
Which
Here
verse?
we
Which verse?
go.
Oh, sorry, first one. Hey, Job, keep reading, Lucas.
Okay, I'll just read this. We don't have a lot of time, Job, but
That's fine.
we're gonna have some fun. Let's say 20 minutes.
I'm here to say dumb stuff.
Let's do it. Gonna give you some opportunity. Okay, this is Hebrews 10. The law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves.
Sounds Platonic, by the way.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. If it could, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once and for all, and would no longer have felt guilty for their sins. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins, because it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, "Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, Here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, O God." I thought that was just Rene Girard, and just an amazing way to sum up that power of that sacrifice.
You know what's funny? Like, there's actually something about this that, in his first main book, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World, Rene Girard discusses the book of Hebrews,
Ah,
and he says, and he is actually annoyed with it then, because he says, like, he wants to argue that religions and myths, they were all about sacrifice, but Christianity, they end the cycle of sacrifice. So he's like, stop calling, what Christ has done another sacrifice, because it's not a sacrifice. It's like
yeah,
he's annoyed with it at the start. And then later on, he says in an interview that he was completely wrong, and he actually thought like it was ridiculous, because essentially what he wanted is he wanted the author of the Hebrews to use the same language that he was using, but essentially you're right, they're making the same point.
Yeah.
So like it's funny that at the start he was like, no, this it's not another sacrifice, but in the end it's like, I guess it is another sacrifice, and perhaps I shouldn't be so, uptight
Yeah.
about saying what is and isn't a sacrifice.
All right. We have Job here for multiple reasons. First, to encourage Aaron to keep going because
We had a long conversation about that
oh, that's
yesterday,
good.
so
That's good. Then
so
just
that's
let's
fine.
hear in your words the stupid stuff.
I'm kind of surprised that in the epistle to the Hebrews, there's this whole section on God is a consuming fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me check.
I mean, that kind of that's so not Paul's style, for what I can tell. At least I don't recognize that in the letters that we attribute to Paul traditionally.
Mhm.
And it's not something we, or at least I, hear a lot in common language, that Old Testamentian God poking through in the New Testament.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Is
remember
enough?
that. Yeah, no, for sure. Like I remember that I was listening to Tim Mackey from the Bible Project, and he was kind of saying like, in some sense, God is really like the sun. That is like it's the thing that gives life. That without like there would be no life, etc. Like all of that. But at the same time, it's so far away. It's incredibly far away. So you're like, and yet if you sit in it for too long, you burn, which is just like crazy. That it's like, which means there's something about God's presence that can be sort of too much, and that needs to be entered into, let's say, very carefully. And nonetheless, it's obviously the beautiful revolution of Christianity that it says like that is now brought to earth directly.
Yeah.
But there's, I think, nonetheless, a valid sense that that also what you see in Exodus, right? That like the two sons of Aaron, I think, when they just burn up, or like as
Yeah, with the temple fire.
yeah, exactly. So you have and even like it was in the reflection today, right, of the Exodus thing that it was talking about the portion of Acts. Oh, you didn't read the reflection yet. You didn't read the reflection yet. It was also
Busted.
the book of Hebrews, but anyways, but they also reflected on the book of Acts. It was the passage that Diego talked about recently. It was about the couple who didn't give enough, like to the church
Yeah,
community,
yeah.
and then they also just died on the spot. So like it's not even that there's this that it's only this Old Testament rageful God. Like I do agree, like it's less in Paul, but nonetheless, yeah.
I mean, if I'm totally honest with you, that scene with the couple that hides part of the money,
Yeah.
I always considered that didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure if I should take it literally. Well, I'll reflect on it. So I just I heard today a bit of unnecessary screen time, but that the owner of OnlyFans died at age 44 of cancer. And I remember like there was this part of me was like he deserved it, which is like like scary to like notice in yourself, right? Like this like that is like what? Why do I have that thought come up even? And then you think like no, have mercy, and then it's like and it's sad. But like I think there's always this duality of human beings, like when we think of people that die tragically, and maybe this couple did, for instance, and then we interpret that in a certain light, if that makes sense.
Well, it could be, or I mean, or I'm wrong, and God just does that sort of stuff. Like there's precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was something else you said that I've now forgotten, but I thought was interesting.
You mean
But I
earlier
can't
Sorry.
remember.
earlier in the stream?
No, just now about the that God. So, oh yeah, sorry. The wild God, that Martin Shaw's kind of now
Yeah.
talking about, but also I can have to think of Lewis's Aslan like, well, it's not a tame lion. It's not a nice lion.
No.
Like, it's a bloody lion. Stay away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good lion, but not good. Like, don't go pet it.
It's still a lion.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the sun.
Yeah. And obviously there's the symbolism too, right? That of the burning bush, which is also burning, but it's not consumed.
I think that.
So-
So does Christ show that fire as well? Is that in him too, or is he supposed to represent a different part of God, like a more loving side? How do you
I
understand
mean, he
that?
comes to bring a sword, you know?
I know, but
Yeah.
he seems like the type of person you want to be near. Everyone wanted to be near him. I don't know if there was such a thing as to be too near him.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. And he also encouraged that, right? Like when he said, like, the what is it? The bridegroom is only here temporarily, so you should celebrate with him and not, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, and so that maybe that manifestation of God is different in some sense than the fullness of him, which is also why we're able to understand him in the form of a person, and so as a person we can draw near, but as it not a person we cannot do that. Like you cannot see God fully.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't know if that changes with Christ. If we're supposed to understand it like that. From what I hear,
Yeah.
Jesus doesn't change God. Like well maybe he does, but God is still God regardless, right?
Of course, like necessarily.
It's necessarily because he's beyond time and beyond space and all those things. But then there is this transformation that, I mean, supposedly God undergoes a transformation in that he learns through Christ what it means to be human.
By the way,
That's a heresy, as
That's
far as I know.
oh, that he
Job is-
learned something. Yeah, okay. That's interesting because in Hebrews it says that sort of more or less specifically, right? That like he had to learn obedience. That's what it says in Hebrew. But one thing that I wanted to add to what you were saying is, so God is not subject to all the change that is happening in reality, etc., like to time,
Right.
etc. But that does not entail that he could not, through his own will, change. He's just not subject to change, which is something different, right? Like, so he doesn't necessarily have to change like all of us have to change through the passage of time. But it is conceivable that God, out of his own will, could change. That is, I don't see a problem there, let's say. I don't think that makes
Well,
him
I
any...
think the issue is that God is changeless.
Yeah. But he could, for
If
instance...
you take the Thomistic
Yeah.
framework, I mean, let's back
I
off.
understand.
I think we're stumbling upon some
exactly.
paradoxes as
The
well.
Thomistic framework is God is simple, so he has no attribute, etc. So, and then it makes sense. But I think in a different way, you could also think like, okay, God decides to, out of his own will, decides to manifest in earthly reality, in our cosmos, in a certain way, and then he decides to manifest in a different way, for instance, even though there's something behind that which is eternal and changeless, for instance.
Yeah, but then it's like, what's the thing that changed, and then it's the the divine and the human nature, so the hypostatic union,
Yeah.
and then the part that learned would have been the human part.
Yeah.
But
Well,
as everything is contained within God, yet nothing exhausts him.
yeah.
Apart from maybe my dumb sayings, is that it necessarily? I don't know how that would even work for God to, like, that everything is already there. You can't add to everything.
Yeah, but that I think we.
I'm sorry.
No. I know. I like it because it really confronts you to how difficult it is to understand God.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's just complete mystery at some point. You can
Yeah, people with my name aren't supposed to do that.
no, especially not you. No, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I like that. I like stumbling against this the limit. This is the limit.
Yeah.
Beyond this,
Yeah.
the reason cannot go. So we have to.
Yeah, and I think like that's also what Jesus says about himself at some point, that this, by the way, relates to Second Peter when in the second letter of Peter, like it's stated, like with God, 1,000 years is but a day, and a
Yeah,
day
that's
is
a good
1,000 years,
line.
etc. And then it's like all about we can't even conceive what the whole plan is, etc. Like very much similar to the end of the book of Job. Anyways, what I wanted to say in that connection relates to Jesus in the Gospels at some point saying there are some things that I don't even know that are only for the Father to know. Just kind of like, which is also interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's nonetheless this separation that is alluded to, but which is unified. So, anyways, that's
Job, you're Catholic, right?
No, I'm Orthodox Reformed.
Oh, I thought you went to Catholic church for a while.
He's a
no?
Calvinist.
I went to a Catholic church like once.
Oh,
You pray to the Rosemary. You pray the Rosemary. Yeah.
Rosemary.
That's the Rosary.
I
my
have a
goodness.
very large rosemary in my backyard.
Malif
but I
even
do
was
not
laughing
pray
at
to
me
it.
when I said that. my goodness.
Joe's been praying to his rosemary plant for days now.
I added too
confused
much rosemary to our
polytheist.
pasta sauce today. That's the reason.
I have a rosary, but I don't pray the Hail Mary.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because she's not privileged among women.
It's
necessarily.
pretty cool, but it's yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I
And it's honestly, it's not something I have such a big hiccup with either.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm metagelical, as Paul Verniclay would say.
Yeah, you are metagelical. That's totally true. But I think all of Orthodox Christianity is becoming metagelical too.
Ooh, harsh.
Can
Sorry.
I can I ask Job how is the Exodus going? Because we got an
Not too
insight
great.
into Aaron's journey. How's yours?
Yeah, this
going?
can just become our anchor call.
That's what I thought.
We can.
Today went
I will
with
leave at
so
some point, and then you can
Lucas,
continue.
wait, can we finish up this and then we'll go to the anchor call, because I do want to go to the anchor call, but if you have to leave soon, like
I have to leave in like 5. But
Yes.
But can I hear what Job was about to say first?
Okay, sure.
We'll
sure,
hear that,
sure.
and then we'll,
Exodus in general, or just
Yeah.
today.
oh yeah, in general, and then today.
I've had better exodi.
Nice.
Speaking in the multiple.
Well, Exodus is a lot easier where you don't have 2 young kids. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
It's I think my best Exodus is when I was able to have like my holy hour, just because there were no kids.
Yeah.
And now it's like I wake up, I have to go to work, and then I come home, there's kids, and then like maybe I have 1 hour in the evening, and I'm gonna go wrap up in a bit. I'm gonna read my Stations of the Cross, and thanks for the Dutch version, Aaron. And it's going pretty good, but I'm not as consistent as I used to be. But then, I read a ton of Bible stories to the kids, so I count those. That's Bible study, I tell you.
Yeah, I count this a little bit, honestly. Like this is it seems like we're getting through a lot of the Bible, which is not the same. Like this is not my prayer part. But I think
Yeah.
of it somewhat definitely as
Keep him accountable, Job. Aaron's cheating this
okay.
whole thing.
If you disagree, like, but also like I have read the Bible today as well. But I'm just saying, like I count this as part of like that for sure.
Yeah, I want to go read Colossians. Have you guys worked through that yet?
Yeah, we read Colossians last time.
Well, last time I was here was Philippians.
It was also Colossians, but we discussed Philippians then for the portion you joined.
Okay, well then I gotta just do Colossians by myself.
Yeah, Colossians is great. That's good. That's good. But next time we'll be discussing the Gospel of Matthew, but it will be second day of Easter.
Yeah, Easter Monday, baby.
Can I say some things, Luke, about
Yeah,
Lucas?
let's wrap it up. I'll leave you
So,
to your anchors.
I'm not necessarily if it's like wrapping up, but I want to speak some things in Second Peter. So some verse that stood out to me. So first of all, in chapter 1, verse 4, he says, "You may become participants in the divine nature," which is pretty interesting. And that he says, having escaped from the decay that is in the cosmos on account of desire. And then he says, he has this beautiful sort of hierarchy of what is most important. He says, supplement your faith with virtue, and your virtue with knowledge, and your knowledge with self-mastery, and self-mastery with perseverance, and perseverance with piety, and piety with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with agape, with love. So it's like pretty beautiful, sort of how it's all grounded in some sense. Then indeed, now there is the Tartarus, which Job was very keen to point out to Bas that it's not in First Peter, it's in Second Peter.
That was
So
funny.
that's definitely relevant. And then I noticed that um, in chapter 2, verse 20, it says, so this is the Dave Bentley Hart translation, having escaped the defilements of the cosmos by a full knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus the Anointed, and yet having become entangled in them again, they are vanquished. The last things have become worse for them than the first. For it was better for them not fully to have known the path of righteousness, than, having known it fully, to turn back from the holy commandments delivered to them. That's
As you
very
just
similar to what we
mentioned,
just discussed,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And it equates it to this saying. It's like a dog having returned to its own vomit, or a washed pig to wallowing in the mud. You know,
pretty
like
rough.
it's like it's similar to that. Okay, now on to the Hebrews. But feel free to interject sort of
No,
in the
yeah, go
meantime if
ahead. Go
anything
ahead. We
stood
don't
out.
have the time.
Okay. Let me actually check. Oh yeah, look at my Hebrews chart. I don't know if you can't see it. You have to. Uh,
Put
sorry.
it, yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I have to change my background. But no, like I have to go to the Hebrews. Let me check. Yeah, so I thought it was just like interesting that he builds it up in such a way. He says he's more important than the angels in the first chapter. Then he says he's like a priest, but he's like a better priest than Moses
A really
was.
good one.
Like a really good one, yeah. Like he has arguments, obviously. And then he was better than Aaron was. And then he was like in the order of Melchizedek. So it really builds up sort of this argument. And then he's like, okay, well, so what do we do with this knowledge now? And then there are a few verses that stood out to me also in that regard. So this is in chapter 2. He says, we see Jesus who was made just a little less than angels, having been crowned with glory and honor on account of suffering death, so that by God's grace he might taste of death on behalf of everyone. For it was fitting for him, on account of whom all things are, and by whom all things are, to perfect through sufferings the originator of their salvation, who has led many sons to glory. I thought that was like kind of intense. And then, as I said, he's building up to Jesus, this eternal priest, which I thought was fascinating. And that also like that the priests, they still need to make offerings for themselves because they're sinners too, but Jesus didn't need to do that. He was the offering. That's really the difference, which you also notice with the Girardian aspect. Um, okay, then he says, he speaks of a few traditions. So he's chapter 6, verse 2, he talks about the church community, saying instructions regarding baptism, as well as the laying on of hands, resurrection of the dead, and the judgment of the age. So those are 4 things, which seems pretty central already then in the year 60, which is interesting because we still have that thing of like placing the hands, for instance, onto people like when they. So I thought that was just fascinating that it sort of goes back this super long time. Okay, then indeed we learn about Abraham, etc. We learn about all these examples that were there, which was obviously also fascinating, which relates to this definition of faith.
Yeah.
That, I'm still curious if you have more to say about it, in terms of like, okay, what does he mean by talking about, okay, faith is what is it? The
Yeah.
realization of things hoped for and the evidence of unseen realities, of realities unseen.
Yeah, the certainty of things hoped for in the other one.
Yeah, exactly. So like
Yeah.
there's multiple translations obviously,
Yeah.
but since
It's
that's
very-
near the end of but like what do you take from that? Like does that get like is that a new idea of faith or is that
For me,
something?
it is. I don't really relate certainty a lot to faith, but he also relates it to
Yeah.
hope. So it's a paradoxical
Yeah.
statement to me. I find it
Yeah,
hard to
yeah.
understand. I have to read it again.
Yeah.
I have to mull it over for a little bit.
Yeah, I remember like what is it? The guy from the Bible Project. He says that like in his sermon about it, where he was like, it's kind of like when it's still very cold outside,
Yeah,
but you could tell that spring is coming because you see the first signs, let's say, of spring.
sure.
So you put on shorts, and in some sense, people will think, let's say, you're ridiculous because it's like cold weather outside, but it kind of has to do with, yeah, but I act out of faith because I can tell that sort of
The
the
pattern.
goodness is coming, and therefore, but I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with it because he can still point to some things that were relevant to him, and I'm not sure if the author is getting at that. And it does seem like it's close to Abraham, right? Like who like has this adventure at the age of 75 and then
Yeah.
sort of goes out and does all these things. So I think that's a pretty good example. Yeah. Um,
I gotta
Okay.
shut down, guys.
Yeah.
Okay,
I gotta shut
sorry.
down too. I really have to. I have a yoga class, guys. Heresy again.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't
No,
know.
it's okay.
I just wanted to finish off, let's say, all the final. It all says about honoring marriage, which is interesting because that's different from our previous thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's in chapter 13.
But we can also save some of these quotes and try to address them
Yeah,
if you can. But
I'll think about it. But Matthew has a lot to discuss, man.
that's true. But we're always stumbling into this problem.
Yeah,
We have a
yeah.
lifetime. We have
That's
a
correct,
lifetime.
that's
But I think
correct.
this is the wrapping up point.
But Hebrews is a beautiful letter. Like
Read
read it
it.
again. And
Read
it's
it.
like it's great. Yeah, read it and read it again. And Job, thank you for joining.
All right,
Much
Jed. Shall I
appreciated.
leave it up so you can have your anchor call in here?
Well, it's a bit public.
No,
Yeah.
I mean I'm not gonna continue the stream. I mean the Zoom link.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
you'll
that sounds
stay in
good.
the Zoom
That sounds
link.
good. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Bye, all the people on YouTube.
Okay. All the viewers.
Bye.
Okay, thank you
Yes.
guys. Good luck with the anchor. I'll see you both soon.
Yes,
Good luck with
thanks.
Exodus.
Thank you.
Stretch.
Stretch. All right.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
I'll make you host there. All right, people. You still here? What you still doing here? Do I have a video capture device? We're gonna do CVE10. Accept. Bring that boy in here. All right. I'm just gonna finish with the Timothy passage because I can zoom myself out over here. I really do have to leave to yoga. Where's Timothy 2? Got some revelation right here. Where are the Bible nerds when you need them? Corinthians, Philippians, Titus, Hebrew. Please. Give me a sec. There we go. All right. Read it. But mark this. There will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with them. They are the kind who worm their way into homes and gain control over weak-willed women, who are loaded down with sins and are swayed by all kinds of evil desires, always learning but never able to acknowledge the truth. Just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so also these men oppose the truth. Men of depraved minds, who as far as the faith is concerned are rejected. But they will not get very far, because as in the case of those men, their folly will be clear to everyone. Good night, people.